So my name is Maurycy. I'm a co-founder of Infura. If you're looking at the schedule and see a different name, that's my co-founder who couldn't be here today. On the technical side, I focus on backend software that supports our infrastructure and helps it scale. So what is Infura? Infura's mission is to provide access to Ethereum and the decentralized web. For 2 years, we've been providing an easy, fast way to access Ethereum with a full-time staff to maintain the infrastructure 24/7, which is not easy. And yeah, we've been around since 2016. We provide endpoints to access mainnet and the 3 major testnets using the JSON RPC interface. And we also provide endpoints for IPFS for decentralized storage, as well as other endpoints for things like pricing data, etc. Another feature we love is our RESTful API, which feels a lot like the JSON RPC API, but uses HTTP GET instead of POST for several methods where this makes sense. So this lets us use a CDN to cache some data, so methods such as getBlock by number and getBlock by hash are very snappy. The CDN is one of the things that helps us scale. If using the standard JSON RPC is important to you, go ahead and use the regular endpoints. Otherwise, use the RESTful endpoints for speed. And there are plenty libraries out there that use Infura. And even if they don't specifically use Infura, you can easily configure them to use these endpoints, which you can see here. We do get a lot of traffic. These days, we serve about 8 billion requests per day, which is about 90,000 requests per second. And in terms of transactions, we average about, I want to say, 12% of the transactions that get relayed to the network. Just if you're curious, we use AWS for infrastructure, and our CDN is Fastly. So today, I'd like to go over 2 or 3 things that we've been thinking a lot about and some directions where we're thinking of taking our project. So let's start by talking about decentralization. This sometimes comes up when people talk about Infura, so let's address it. When Infura was founded in 2016, we were very much aware of the decentralization arguments. Some of us on the project are Ethereum OGs, and we've been involved with decentralization or decentralized projects since before Ethereum was a twinkle in Vitalik's eye. So we're very sensitive to these arguments. Infura also went through a number of internal reviews inside consensus, and the topic came up. But we felt that the benefit of Infura to the community was worth it. And I think we've been correct about that. For example, we'd like to take a little bit of credit for the bull market of 2017. We weren't quite as visible back then, but many, even most, I think, ICOs relied on Infura. So we had Golem, BAT, EOS, Gnosis. All these guys did very well using our service. And the interest that was generated in the ecosystem as a result of these successful ICOs has been very good for the entire ecosystem. So imagine last year if Infura had not been around, or imagine if we had decided to do something silly like charge users, regular investors for access to the network. So at the same time that these ICOs were happening in early 2017, we started becoming concerned about the problems of incentivizing participation in the network and network access. And we created an internal project inside Infura called INFP, where we're exploring some ideas to address these pretty tricky problems. So let's talk about incentivization. So some people think that incentivization will help get people running full nodes. So assume we have some sort of market-based mechanism to incentivize nodes. But for a second, let's ignore a couple inconvenient variables. Let's ignore the fact that the cost to run a node is different for different people. You could be running your node on your laptop or in the cloud. Different clouds have different specs for their VMs and charge different prices. Your configuration options affect how many resources your client uses. But let's ignore all that for a second. So the first thing to note is that you'll never be able to make money running a full node with this incentivization scheme, even if the price adjusts. Why? Because as soon as it's profitable to run a node, as soon as you can, pay $100 for a DigitalOcean droplet and make a little more than that with this scheme, the people who are good at running nodes, the medium and the large players, will simply spin up more nodes. They're good at it. They have the tooling. They have the automation, and they're going to drive the price back down to at least, zero. At least so it's a wash for you. So the only remaining options are it's going to be a wash or you're going to lose money. Maybe you'll recover some of your costs, but not all. It's just my gut, but I suspect that this market mechanism would never be able to fully cover your costs. So it wouldn't even be a wash. You'd be losing at least a little bit of money. I think there would be always some sort of behavior in the network that would push the price in such a way that you just wouldn't recover everything. But we need to run some simulations to test this. It's just a gut feeling right now. But here's the worst thing. I think even if you were able to recover all your costs, that's not enough. I think people in this day and age expect the app experience to be a certain way. We have our phones, that sort of sets the standard. And people just don't want to install anything else besides that. It's just too much work. It's just as much of a disincentive as the monetary cost is. And that's a problem. What do we do about this? I don't know. Long term, skipping ahead, I think what's going to happen is we're going to have light clients on people's computers. We're going to have light client servers that are incentivized to provide data to the light clients. And entities such as Infura could host the light client servers and recover our costs. This would solve several problems, not all of them. It would solve the problem of trust, because now instead of trusting the JSON RPC interface, there's a protocol to ensure that the data is trusted. It would partially solve the problem of decentralization, because there would be other players running these light client servers. It would partially solve the problem of UX, but it wouldn't fix everything. Definitely not everything. But it would certainly be an improvement from what we have today. But I'm still not sure how we're going to get to this partial nirvana. The good news is this year there's been a lot more interest in this problem. We're happy that it's getting more attention. And we've been engaging with some people in the ecosystem who are also thinking about this stuff. We're talking to a guy named Andre who's running a project called VIP Node. He's attacking the light client server angle. There's a project called DappNode from Griff Green and his team of merry men who's trying to decentralize Infura. There's a project called dnode that came out of Buenos Aires, which was also trying to decentralize Infura. I don't have too much info on them, but I did hear about them. And there is an EIP to reward clients and full nodes for validating transactions. So all these people are in the space. They're trying to figure this out. And yeah, we're working with some of them. So if you'd like to collaborate on incentivizing full nodes or decentralizing Infura, please reach out to us. We'll probably talk a bit more about our INFP work at DevCon in a few months, and that's assuming we can get tickets to DevCon. In the meantime, I hope you'll think of Infura as bridging the gap, as supporting the ecosystem until we have all these things figured out. Because I think the service is pretty valuable, and comparing it or Ethereum to other blockchains, I think having Infura has been very helpful. So another topic that's on our minds. When we started Infura, we had hoped that we could treat the Ethereum client as a black box, that we could put some scaffolding around it and it would just work, but we were quickly disabused of that notion. The Geth and Parity teams do a great job of building these clients that support the entire network, but when we run them at scale in the cloud, it's something that they weren't designed to do, and we run into a few issues. So for example, in the abstract, you know that a blockchain is synchronized across the entire network, but as we know, near the tip of the chain, things get a little dicey. There's block propagation issues, there's reorgs, that sort of thing. If you put the clients behind a load balancer, which we do, it's as if you were running with multiple databases in the back, especially near the tip of the chain. So it's important to make it seem as though there's a single database containing all the blockchain data. Second, another issue is running all these clients in our cluster is a bit wasteful because, for example, they each use a lot of disk space. They each talk to the peer-to-peer network and are sending all this data, which is sort of redundant. So I remember when our AWS account would hit limits because of our disk usage, because this type of stuff you put into AWS normally doesn't use so much disk. If we run a Geth with all the bells and whistles, it's close to a terabyte for each instance that we run. So I think the solution to this problem is to have a client that's meant for the cloud from the ground up. Our thinking is if you can implement a client as a set of microservices, you can scale each microservice independently and it would work a lot better in that environment. So you could have a microservice for downloading blocks, you could have another one for the transaction pool, another one for the EVM, etc. So I think this would result in a client that's very robust and scalable, and it would look exactly like Geth running on your localhost. So we have been doing some work around this. We're collaborating with other people who are thinking along the same lines. For example, the Pegasus team has a client in the works called Pantheon, which is supposed to be modular and enterprise grade. Maybe we'll use some of their stuff. And if we include any additional code and it makes sense to open source it, or if we write any additional code, we'll open source it if it makes sense. And again, we're happy to collaborate with anyone who's doing work in this area. So that's the cloud client. Last thing, I want to give you a sneak peek at a cool project called SQL, which is GraphQL for Ethereum. It was created by Rahul Kripalani from the Pegasus team, and the two of us did a workshop on it earlier today. GraphQL is a flexible, powerful query language, and when you combine it with Ethereum, you get SQL. It could be a new way to interface with Ethereum, and let me give you an example of what this looks like. So on the left bottom side, you can see a query in GraphQL. On the right bottom side, you can see the response. So here we're asking for a range of blocks, 5 blocks, and we're extracting different pieces from the response. We want the hash. From the transactions, we want the address and the balance of the sender, and we want the value. And the result looks like this, and it's awesome. You're not wasting all this bandwidth moving data that people don't care about. and that results in, look at the space savings, so 80% space savings, but the real kicker is the queries. So to do this query in regular JSON RPC would take over 1,800 calls, which is insane. So this is awesome. It's great. Raul officially announced the alpha today, so check it out. Yeah, so I think if there's enough interest in this, I think it would be great if we could, if it could become a new standard eventually in Ethereum, and we could deprecate JSON RPC. So yeah, those are 3 of the things that are on our minds. Any questions?